Squamish traditional territory in Gibsons. Councillor Ladwig is not with us tonight. She's off on DFO business, and she wishes us well. She's here in spirit, and I believe we're waiting for Sasha to come. We'll see. Sasha Stipek is planning to come tonight. So we have an agenda, and if I could ask council to approve the agenda, or do we have any additions to the agenda? Is there anything we have that not on? Okay, so ask council for a resolution. Councillor Kroll, Councillor D'Andrade, all in favor? Thank you. It's approved. First item is adoption of the minutes, regular minutes of June 4, 2019. Motion to adopt those minutes. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Lumley, all in favor? Thank you. They're adopted. And then a special meeting of June 11, 2019, that the minutes be adopted. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Kroll, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. Besides the statement that I'm going to present, is there anything else arising from the minutes? Okay, so the issue, of course, I'm going to address is arise from the June 4th minutes, and that was the statement that was presented by our CAO at that time. So if you'll bear with me, I have some reading to do, and we all know what happens when you divert from the written page, and I think that we have some examples of that in politics when you start reading off the cuff and making other comments. So I will simply begin my statement. So copies of this will be available to everybody after the meeting, so that you don't need to take notes. We are being recorded, by the way, in case anybody wasn't aware of that. So this is titled Response by Town of Gibsons Mayor Bill Beamish to comments made by CAO Emmanuel Machado to Council on June 4, 2019. Tonight, as I begin my remarks, I want to apologize. First to staff for not recognizing the extent of personal stress and injury caused to you by events in recent years, and for allowing attacks against staff to continue unchallenged and unresolved. And second to the community for not addressing the loss of trust, confidence, and respect that exists for some towards our council and government. We can and will do better. Today we must acknowledge the past, respond to the present, and begin to change our future. To do less will be more of the same divisive behavior that has beset Gibsons since 2013. I'm going to preface my remarks by saying thank you. Thank you to Council for the support you've shown our staff. Thank you to the public for the many acts of kindness, and thank you to CAO Emmanuel Machado for the courage to bring this issue out into the open. I believe that this current council became complacent, thinking that we had passed the 6-month mark of our tenure without any major issues or controversy, and that the acts and actions of the past were behind us. We were wrong. In hindsight, the first thing we should have done after being elected was to work with our staff to discuss and address the cumulative impacts of more than 5 years of attacks against their professionalism, their commitment to doing a good job, their abilities, and the knowledge of how best to serve and support this community. During the past 2 weeks, there has been an overwhelming public response and support for Mr. Machado and for our staff. Of course, there have also been negative comments. However, on balance, I believe that most in our community are tired of the divisiveness and aggressive manner of opposition to almost every project, idea, or solution offered in response to applications from developers or for the improvement and maintenance of our community, especially if the infrastructure in question is used in any way by the 3 big development projects recently approved. Civil democracy and discourse is almost non-existent, having been replaced by personal attacks on staff, false or misleading statements, and suggestions of corruption or criminal activity. For some, this negative behavior also extends to our town's natural asset program, which has been internationally recognized for its progressive, eco-friendly, and cost-conscious approach to asset management. Words matter. Incompetent, unprofessional, uneducated, corrupt, criminal, and eco-ass strategy have all been used to refer to our CAO and staff in letters, email, and publicly at meetings and hearings. Meanwhile, our staff have been consistently recognized elsewhere, including by the Auditor General for Canada, the Union of BC Municipalities, and by many other cities and organizations in BC and around the world, and by their peers in local government. Later this month, in fact, Mr. Machado has been invited to go to Halifax to present our eco-asset strategy to a committee of federal and provincial government ministers from across Canada. It is unfortunate that such behavior and name-calling does not stop with our staff or council. Recently, I was contacted by a resident who was similarly targeted just for supporting the continuation of fireworks in our town. This resident stated that she was verbally attacked and abused online, with the result that she became afraid and took down her posts. Is this how we now treat our fellow citizens? I am reminded of the article in the Coast Reporter on September 5, 2018, wherein Councillor Jeremy Vallerette recounts his experience on council. He commented, and I quote, "There's the complaining, the mistrust, and the personal attacks. It takes a creeping emotional toll. You try to shake it off, but people say some horrible things to each other, and it sinks down deep and disturbs you." As much as this kind of constant and repetitive behavior impacts members of council who are here by choice, it also affects the morale, mental health, and stress levels of staff who are constantly challenged, personally and professionally attacked, and blamed for council decisions over which they have no control. No one on council or staff disagrees with honest, open, fair, and respectful criticism and debate. That should be our goal, and our actions should reflect that. At council and in our day-to-day interactions with the public, we try to do our best to model these values, and I believe that we succeed. Not only because it is the right thing to do, but because we recognize that to act otherwise results in the kind of divisiveness that we as a community need to leave behind. The costs of this kind of behavior are many. Financial, over $300,000 paid in legal bills. Personal stress, time lost on projects while staff focus on defending the town or in court or responding to unfounded allegations made to the Ombudsman or other tribunals. Cost to recruit and retain staff. Cost to the reputation of our community, and lost opportunities with respect to decisions made by many people who are too intimidated or afraid to speak up or to run for council. Our community reputation has suffered and will continue to suffer until we find a new way forward. Again, I believe that our community does not wish to continue down this route. In a recent letter copied to the Attorney General, the RCMP, the Auditor General for Local Government, the Municipal Insurance Association, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs, it was inferred that council and staff have been involved in activity that warrants criminal investigation. In response, we have contacted each of these organizations and offered to fully cooperate with them if necessary. A copy of this statement has also been sent to them. The same letter also stated that the current council is not open and transparent. However, since taking office in November, our council has made it a priority to ensure that as much information as we can legally provide is made available on our website with respect to ongoing projects. Last year, the current council also amended the procedure bylaw to provide an additional opportunity for members of the public to ask questions at council meetings, and we continue to respond promptly to many emails and questions received from the community every day. In addition, we held 5 advertised budget meetings, which no one attended, held a sparsely attended budget open house, held 2 public information sessions on the Proust Road lift station, met with the O'Shea-Oceanmount Community Association and others to discuss the project, and provided reports and information on the town website. We've also had a regular presence in the community, and we truly recognize the need to be accessible and responsive to our community. In May and June alone, I and members of council have participated in more than 25 public events besides the regular meetings of council and committees. These include the home show, where Councillor Kroll, a staff member, and I handed out information and answered questions, as well as the recent business walks in which our CAO, Council, and Chamber of Commerce members spent a day conducting surveys at local businesses. Soon we plan to engage the community about our ideas for a new strategic plan, and we are currently forming committees to advise Council on affordable housing, a tree bylaw, and other matters. and the recently passed budget provides $10,000 in funding for the installation of necessary equipment to permit live streaming of council meetings via YouTube. In short, we are open and transparent, and we will continue to be so. Moving ahead, I believe that we, council members, staff, and residents, need to recommit to engaging with each other in a calm, respectful, and thoughtful way. We need to abandon us against them storylines, as hard as it might be to do so, and instead acknowledge and build on what we share, a deep love for our community. If we want different outcomes, we must do things differently, starting right now. We need a way forward. In that spirit, Council is committed to implementing these next steps. Number 1, we will adopt a zero tolerance policy against bullying and harassment. Bullying and harassment are never okay and will not be tolerated in any form in either verbal or written communications. We will not engage with any person who uses bullying or harassment techniques to intimidate, threaten, or malign staff or council. We will work with our current bullying and harassment policy. This policy applies to people who work for the town, including consultants, and those who come onto our premises and interact with staff. We will review the new model municipal code of conduct developed by UBCM, which establishes a set of principles and general standards as a starting point for local governments to develop their own code of conduct. We will review our procedure bylaw to ensure that it incorporates best practices with respect to decorum at council meetings and public hearings. We will respond to staff concerns. As an employer, Council must respond to complaints of stress and bullying and harassment within our organization. The Workers' Compensation Act requires that we investigate and take appropriate actions. WorkSafe recognizes significant workplace stressors such as bullying and harassment and the right of workers to file complaints. In addition, the town has a bullying and harassment policy that as Mayor and Council we are required to follow. We accept this responsibility, and we're going to invest the resources required to engage a consultant to work with our staff. We have already discussed our needs with a Vancouver law firm that specializes in conflict resolution and building positive workforce culture. On June 17th, Council met with staff in an all-staff luncheon in Council chambers to acknowledge staff concerns about the current environment and to reinforce Council's commitment to working with them to ensure our shared workplace is one that they can all be proud of. We are committed to fostering an engaged community that respects staff efforts while participating in constructive dialogue. We will reach out to the community with opportunities to dialogue and exchange views about how we can respectively interact with each other. As Mayor, I plan to reinstitute the Gibsons Community Dialogue Program, which provides a monthly opportunity for residents to discuss topical issues of concern. I will participate in these dialogues along with members of staff and other councillors who are available to attend. The first dialogue has been set for Tuesday, July 30th at 7 p.m. in Council chambers, and a regular monthly schedule for these dialogues will be established beginning in September. I have also been in contact with Arjun Singh, the current president of UBCM, and with Greg Moore, an ex-mayor and former chair of the Metro Vancouver Board of Directors, to discuss other ways that we can respond to our current situation as a community. I will be sharing the ideas that come out of these discussions with Council in the coming weeks. We will continue to be open and transparent in our actions and decision-making, except where required by the Community Charter or limited by Access to Information Act or other legislation. We will continue to be open and will transact our business in public. In closing, I would like to thank the entire community in advance for their renewed commitment to more respectful engagement and civil discourse, as well as staff for working with us on this important issue. I am confident together we can move beyond current tensions to a more accepting place. Copies of this statement will be available after this meeting and posted on the town Gibsons website. Additionally, we plan to publish a brief summary of our commitment to renewing civil discourse within our community in the Coast Reporter this Friday. Thank you. Okay. Next item of business. We have a delegation. The delegation is Verna Chan discussing a proposal for a lantern festival. Verna, please come forward. And Council, you have a copy of that proposal on the table in front of you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I'll just basically read from this. Our concept is to engage community with a picnic in Wine Garden Park, an opportunity to create and conduct a lantern festival procession along the foreshore from Wine Garden to the gazebo and beyond, with the safest route to be determined. And also have another couple other things, dance lesson, and accompany the event with some great food and some music throughout the evening. In the future, this could be a larger festival that may encompass a couple of days, but for this year, we were just looking for something to fill the weekend that would have been Sea Cavalcade. And as I'm also organizing Music in the Landing, to me that was a weekend with no music. So, and I had a band that had been ready to go, but could only play that weekend. So it seemed like a good fit. So with the short timeline we have available, we wanted to propose a mini lantern festival, which would take place on July 27th. We'd have a couple of bands. We'd have a local band opening, and Jim Foster would be that person with a band, and Toronto musician Michael Occhipinti, who's a fabulous jazz R&B player, who's going to be touring at that time. And he has already been booked for another venue in Gibsons, but we want to move that performance to Wine Garden, where he could play 2 sets instead of our usual 1 set that we do on Saturday night for Music in the Landing. And we start early in the evening with a lantern making session. We'd set up things in the band shell for that, and the Music in the Landing tent would be across the field on the other side where it normally is. And invite everyone to participate and make a simple lantern, and just set it up as kind of a family picnic with a few food trucks around, and then people can make lanterns. There'd be a salsa dance lesson and music, and then as the lights, as the sun goes down, the lantern procession.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I did speak with Mika.
Yes, I appreciate that.
And it's too early in the season for them to get that together, and also it gets dark too late for them to do that. So
Okay. So what Vern is referring to is another proposal for kind of a light painting of the harbor area sort of thing, and then maybe another time or later we may hear from that proposal yet. So I think for a time when, as you say, it is darker, maybe a little earlier while people are still up. Yeah.
So I did include a bit of a timeline on the second page there in a draft budget.
Yeah. So Verna and I met with Wendy Gilbertson earlier this week and talked, so Wendy's aware of this. She couldn't be here tonight. She's in Vancouver. So this is appears to be a doable project, and certainly one that I would support. But I'll invite council to ask any questions. Please.
I just came across this right now, but I'm supportive of this project, right? I think it's great. I think it gives entertainment, which is what we like to have at the harbor. And I don't see, like I said, you talked to Wendy, so right now I don't have any idea of any question that I would have. I just want to show my support.
Good. Well, Saturday nights generally for our Music in the Landing has always been a really big night down there, and it always seems to start off like a family picnic kind of. And I wanted to encourage that behavior, so we could make it even.
I like the lessons. I think it's
yes, the dance lesson is going to be very fun.
Councillor Lumley.
I think it's a great idea. Obviously, the music and stuff like that is awesome. I mean, I did note your draft budget. Are you asking the town for the money to put this on? Is that part of the deal, the $7,600?
Yep.
Okay. Because I just got this too, when I got in here. This is the first I've got it, so I know we've gone through budget, we've gone through grants and so on and so forth. I guess we just haven't discussed yet.
Yeah.
I mean, as good as the project may be, funding it. So I guess that will come at a later date. But anyway, so the $7,600 you're asking the town of Gibsons for, right? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
The funding would be, if I'm not mistaken, to Mr. Douglas, available from the fireworks that we would otherwise have been allocating funding towards.
Yeah, that would be the plan. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Kroll?
I'm sort of in support of the project. I think it's a good thing to sort of bring family together, and I know there's a lot of people disappointed over the absence of Sea Cavalcade, and I think it's a good project that, you know, hopefully can be incorporated. I looked at the proposal for the painting the town with light, and obviously there's not enough time to pull that off in between now and the event. But I think it's a good project to hopefully can be expanded into a bigger event for future years.
That's what we hope, yeah.
I would like to say thank you for organizing this and coming to us with this. It sounds to me like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that it's something that really fits in with the character of the town of Gibsons.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, we need to have a resolution, possibly two resolutions. One would be to council support financially for this project, that allocate $7,600 out of our budget, the budget that is currently set aside for the fireworks. And the second one would be that we extend this into our MIA insurance. And I don't know what we need to do to do that. Is there a specific action we need to take, CIO? Do you know? Just notify them?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, so if council deemed this to be a town-sponsored event, then we would notify MIA what the event is and number of expected volunteers and so on, so that folks can be covered under the same insurance.
In for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, it is a town-sponsored event, clearly. So that, Stafford? Councilor Lumley?
And Stafford, yeah. Can we bring this back, like once we have all that information, like regarding insurance and so on and so forth? Can we bring this back to, or maybe if you want, I mean, we've been having tons of special council meetings, so I don't think I'd support a resolution today, but I think I'd just like to have all our ducks in a row, insurance, so on and so forth, finances, before I make a decision on it. That's my view.
I'm comfortable with that. I guess the question I have is, what does delay do to you? How quickly do you need a...
Well, I have already got musicians lined up for the event, just making sure that they were all available. So that's done, and we will have to get... I've budgeted in 3 weeks of advertising for that, so we can get the word out. And so, you know, like the timeline is very, very short.
Yeah. Right. Councillor Kroll?
I would, if I can make a motion, that because you have had conversation with Wendy Gilbertson.
Yep.
So I'm assuming she's in the loop and has flagged any issues that might have been concerned. There is mention of the special meeting on June 30th. Is it something we could bring in your, was it June 30th? The dialogue meeting?
Dialogue meeting. July 30th.
Oh, July 30th. Too late.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's right, yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to make a motion that, you know, with that staff sort of look at this with Wendy Gilbertson and we consider proceeding just so the proper ducks can be lined up with respect to booking the musicians and that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because of the time frame, I don't really want to hold up in a questionable way, and I wonder if a motion could be made such that it be the council approves it subject to confirmation of MIA insurance and that. Mr. Douglas, is there any question that we have $7,600 that could be taken from the allocation for these fireworks?
We have about 16,000 in there for the Sea Cavalcade,
right?
Of which some will be utilized for the weekend in August,
right?
August 11th, I believe.
All right. So that Councillor Lumley.
I appreciate the idea, and I think it sounds great. if there's one thing I learned from going to all these conferences, and it's that I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm just not comfortable making a decision in front of a delegate when I just got the information in front of me.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to hear back from staff. Yeah. I can't make a decision for the town without the appropriate information that comes back from staff. And as great as this might seem, and I'm drawing from, like I said, that meeting when the mayor of Tofino agreed to have a sculpture made, and was the most terrific decision she made from a delegate. So, I mean, you learn all these things, but I think and I'm not against it. Yeah. I just don't want to vote on something or make a resolution before I think staff can appropriately assess it and make a recommendation back to me, which then I can agree with. That's my concern right now.
But you would be available for a special meeting if we had a report? Okay, so I'm comfortable with that. If we could do something in terms of maybe next week, have a quick meeting, if you allow us to delay for...
I think as long as, if I can hear back by, I would say Monday at the latest, because, we do have to get the advertising going, otherwise...
I appreciate that. So we will make every effort to do that, and Monday at the latest. What's your cutoff for the newspapers? Sean, Connie? Sorry?
Advertising. Yeah.
Advertising.
I believe it's Wednesday.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. So, yeah. Let us work on it. Yeah. Thank you, Verna, for your presentation. We will get back to you as quickly as we can, and we will task. Does staff have a copy of the proposal?
I do. If you could make a motion to direct staff to prepare a report around the details of the proposed event.
Yes, thank you. Somebody want to move that? Councillor Crowell? Councillor Lumley? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vernon. Okay, we're at the first inquiry session. The first inquiry session deals with items that are on the agenda for this evening. So if there are any questions related to any of the items on the agenda, inquiries under our inquiry process, each individual must state their name and jurisdiction of residence. Each individual question shall be limited to 2 minutes. Priority given to questions related to items on the agenda at this time. The maximum time allowed on this agenda is 10 minutes for inquiry. So, first inquiry session. Anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. To administrator reports. The first item is the Armours Beach piling. Director of Infrastructure Services. Armours Beach piling replacement.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. This report deals with the swim area of Armours Beach. Excuse my voice. I've been down with the flu or something. And hopefully I can be coherent as I'm providing you this background. So we've got a group of 6 pilings that are defining the swimming area down in Armours Beach. And during the December storm in 2018, 2 of the pilings were knocked down. And subsequent to that, we had an inspection done of the remaining pilings. And it was determined that I think 1 was sound and the rest were in a fairly rough shape. There are some photographs on a subsequent page that do show some of the condition of the piles. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval to essentially negotiate with Pelagic Technologies. Normally, we would go through a competitive process on doing work such as replacing these pilings, and due to demands on staff time, we've been unable to initiate that as of yet. Excuse me. We've also got the 2019 swimming season knocking at our back door here. In fact, probably people are out there swimming already, I would imagine. There's 3 items that need to be done in order of importance. One is to cut the broken piling stubs from the 2 fallen piles because there are sharp edges on them. 2 is to remove the remaining corroded and damaged pilings, if possible. If not possible, then they would be actually cut down below the mud line rather than actually pulling them out. And then thirdly would be reinstall the new pilings. There is also a budget for design of the swimming area, and ideally it would be nice to have that design completed before we consider putting the pilings back in their existing location. However, again, time constraints, that's just not going to be able to happen if we want the pilings done in time for this year. And probably the key thing is one, of course, the safety of the swimmers, and 2 is that one of the pilings is one of the anchor points for the swim float. And so without that piling in there, we can't anchor the swim float. And in fact, the swim float's out of the water at the moment. The other issue or concern with changing the configuration of the pilings in the swim area is that right now the initial feedback that we've received from the federal authorities is that this is kind of repair work. If we start expanding the area, then it would become a new structure. And a new encroachment into the water. I'm not sure of the exact terms. And it would have to meet all current regulations. And the swim float in its current location does not meet those regulations. It would have to get moved further away from shore, which would involve actually extending the existing pier, the existing walkway that goes out to that float. And of course, significant more cost. So, all things considered, staff is suggesting that the pilings remain in their present location. And then, as far as the design goes, staff is still proposing that be completed in 2019. However, that design process would be occurring after the pilings go in and after the retaining wall that has been on the books for a couple, 3 years now has been replaced. That's fronting Armours Beach itself. And on page 3 of the report, we've given you kind of a conceptual idea of what the swim area could possibly look like. There was a public engagement in, I believe it was 2014, around this swim area, and I have a feeling I'm missing one of the key points, but the points that were brought up were improved accessibility, provision of kayak launching facilities, and improvements to the swimming area. Have I nailed them all, Mr. Machado?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The additional, I think, was around making it a family-focused area.
Thank you. So the diagram there does show proposed wider floats to accommodate launching of kayaks. We did look at the idea of actually doing a full ramp out into the ocean so that they would have separate access, but the hurdles and the loss in habitat we felt were too significant to put that forward as a viable proposal. So essentially, yeah, staff is just seeking council approval on negotiating with Pelagic Technologies within budget at a staff level, and that staff prepare conceptual plans for the fall of 2019 for 2020 improvements to the Armours swimming area for presentation and input to the public, or input from the public.
Thank you. Motion to receive the report. Moved to Councillor Kroll, Councillor D'Andrade. All in favor? Thank you. Report's received. Questions, Council? Councillor Kroll?
You mentioned that most of the pilings are deteriorated or broken. Are you going to replace them all? Or are you going to leave the one lone guy there to...
We would probably replace them all, providing we can do that within the budget. And in fact, we are recommending installation of an additional 7th piling parallel to the shore in between the two furthest most pilings to allow us a little bit more flexibility as far as anchoring for expansion of the swim float area.
Okay. In the proposal you're offering where there are sort of an expansion of the floats, these floats would stay in year-round? Or is there option to reduce them for the winter to minimize storm damage?
That would be kind of getting down into the details, and we would be looking for input from someone more qualified on that matter. And the intent would be that we provide the public with a diagram of what things could look like and certain options, such as what you suggest there, so that they have kind of a drawing board to start from.
Well, I have a bit of an ulterior motive here because the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue for a number of years have sponsored the Polar Bear Swim. So traditionally there has been enough of a dock there that the safety boat can be brought in for the event. I'd just like that to be sort of considered when the negotiations are made for a new dock.
I think that I can certainly see the benefits of that because as you can see from the diagram as well, essentially it's a walking area that could be used at any time of the year, whether you're planning on taking a dip or not.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Two resolutions. Someone would care to move the resolutions? Councillor Kroll, Councillor Diendrad. So that is that the staff be authorized to negotiate with Pelagic Technologies for the removal of the broken and corroded pilings at Armours Beach and to award such work at a staff level provided pricing falls within established budgets. And further, the staff prepare conceptual plans in the fall of 2019 for 2020 improvements to the Armours Beach swimming area for presentation and input from the public. All in favor? That's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our file is council reports. So that first of all, invite any councillor who would like to make a report to engage. Councillor Kroll.
I had the opportunity as a first responder of attending a meeting with all first responders on the coast, including the RCMP, and they even brought in some people from the Lower Mainland. We had BC Ambulance Service. Basically, all the Marine Search and Rescue units on the coast were there, and it was a meeting to deal with the interface fire hazard. There were 4 excellent presenters. They together sort of covered some of the same material, but it was they really drove the point home that we are sort of sitting in a situation where we have sort of 3 strikes against us and we're sort of arguing with the Empire as to where we should go from here. Mayor Beamish, I don't know if you want to add to it. You joined me for the evening session at the high school in Sechelt. It was basically the same presentation, but I think the point was driven home that we've got a very serious situation on our hands, and they've brought to our attention some of our shortcomings, situation with a rather restrictive single source dependence on water in the regional district. So I think it was a really good conference. I think there's going to be a lot of very positive outcome from it.
I think one of the things that struck me was a presenter from Williams Lake who talked about the 10-hour trip he took from going from Williams Lake to 100 Mile House in a car, because that's how long it took with an evacuation down the single road, and which of course we have a single road, and that was the problems that they had up there. People running out of gas and all that types of things that occur in that kind of situation. So things we have to think about as a community.
The other thing I attended the 40th anniversary of Coast Cable, which Mayor Beamish was also there for. Something that didn't come out, it's really interesting. They had a sort of video presentation of their 40 years on the coast, which was great. I don't think Steve Sleep really deserved the credit that should be awarded to him. I met Steve originally back in '77 when he was a lighting technician at CBC, and then I worked with him on Beachcombers. But he really has been a very significant driving force with the local cable station. He's gotten involved. Again, from put on the search and rescue hat, he has sort of spearheaded the, they call it Crash the Coast, we call it Fill the Boot, the initiative with first responders, and out on the first Saturday in December, collecting money for the Elves Club. And it's really impressive, the amount of work that he does in the community. And I felt the ceremony was sort of dragging on, and it was getting a bit long, so I didn't really have an opportunity to speak. But I really would like to acknowledge all the work that Steve has done in the community.
Yes. Great job. Yeah.
And the last thing was the 204 Navy League Cadets ceremony at the Legion on Saturday. We don't have a huge Navy League cadet group, but they were very inspiring. They're very dedicated group of children, and once again I have to commend the volunteer spirit of the parents who work with these young people. I was very impressed to see it was 3 male cadets and 3 female cadets, and this little young lady made out like a bandit when it came time for the awards. It was really quite impressive. And they had some great displays. And again, if it's one of those things, if you have the opportunity to, see it advertised in the paper, it's very inspiring to attend these, because you really see the passion and commitment that people are contributing to the community.
Thank you. Others there? Councillor Deindrad?
I have attended 3 events. The first one was at Elphinstone, another talk about climate change organized by Youth for Climate Action. It was quite interesting. Mayor Beamish participated with SRD Chair Lori Pratt, MLA Nicholas Simon, MP. She couldn't attend at another event. And who else was at the table? Oh, Mayor Seegers, yeah. It was quite interesting. They had some questions, but I realized that the regional government and Gibsons have pretty good responses for climate change at the local level. We still have to count some numbers. I think we have some homework to do in terms of greenhouses count and there's some challenge in that, but overall I felt quite confident of the approaches that the SRD and the town are having and the need for regional growth. But one interesting thing is, even I said this a lot at the event, that the biggest action that we have to have at the moment is also at the federal level and the provincial levels, because we need mass investment in massive change. So even though at the local level we do have responsibility, we need policies at the federal level and the provincial level that enable the change at the scale that we need to really make it happen. We don't have too many years. Some scientists are predicting 5 years, so we need to move fast. I also participated at the seniors table planning at Pender Harbor. It was a lot of updates, so I'm not going to do them here, but I found quite interesting, because part of the conversation was about the 911, when people phone 911, what they should be telling the attendant. So when whether the paramedics or police or firefighters get to the local, they know exactly what to do, and even details about if the person, which room in the house, because sometimes there are big homes, if there's a dog or not, and if there's a dog, can you please put the dog in the room? So I thought it was quite interesting, because 911 is not a new thing, but still, for many people, we have no idea how to act. So I will have a conversation. Maybe perhaps the town can do something, help, because right now, even with the risk of fires, there's a lot of seniors in the community, and this is important. And the conversation about 911 was not only presented by the paramedic, but also the RCMP. So I thought it was quite interesting. A lot of talk about 911. The last event I participated was Business Walks. I ended up doing 2 days because I felt myself and Doug from the chamber, we got what we call Meet Gibsons, and I thought it was quite interesting. Part of the business owners felt some need for some identity because they always talk about lower Gibsons and upper Gibsons, but not about mid Gibsons. And that's the interest because we had this conversation during the strategic planning about identity that neighborhoods could have or should have. And in this case, I think they would like to have. So it was quite interesting. That's it.
Sure. I'd like to report that I just learned there was a Mid Gibsons. I've never heard of that before. So I guess we'll have to redo these maps. But I also went on the business walks, and then I met up with Councillor Kroll and the RCAO and some others that went on the walks too. I did it with Vineet, whose business is High Beam Dreams. And I'm excited to hear about, I really want to see the results of it because I went on these business walks the last time we did them, the last term, and if I had to gauge both, every business owner that we talked to and met with was way more positive. So I think that's a good sign for the town, and I'm really excited to hear what happens with the results of the surveys. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
Thank you. I also participated on the business walks. I was on the team with Doug and Anne-Marie in Mid-Gibsons. It was, yeah, like Stafford was saying, a lot of the businesses were reporting like really positive growth, and they seemed to be doing really well. Again, they were saying that they wanted more of an identity, and a lot of them were saying that they wished that there was more like ATMs or maybe a cafe or something that would bring foot traffic there because it's quite a difficult location. Another thing that I found interesting, one of the questions on our survey was talking about how a plastic bag ban would affect the businesses, and we only had one, which was the laundromat that was dependent on the plastic bags. The other ones were very supportive of the idea, and they said that they were already doing their best to minimize their ecological footprint, and they would be happy to see that come into legislation.
Sorry, something I did forget. I attended the Gibsons Landing Harbour Authority meeting for Councillor Lumley on Monday evening, and they're a great group of people looking after the government wharf for us. The most interesting thing out of the whole thing, some of the projects that they've had afoot have been delayed because of availability of contractors and so on and so forth. But the one report that did come up was the recent film shoot. And it was sort of a win-win for them. They managed to recoup a location fee, which was good for them. That I think the town also has a bit of a location fee that we charge for film units. On the whole, it was a pretty good event. The only hiccup was, again, it was a bit of a communication thing. Some of the people in the Bay area and along between here and Armours Beach weren't aware that they were doing a night shoot on the last night of their shooting. And they had the Yellowfin decked up as a party boat, and it was a party boat for all intents and purposes of shooting. And a few of the people in the neighborhood who thought they were going to have an early night didn't. So lesson learned there. It's always interesting dealing with film units. They tend to think they're somewhat empowered by the fact that we're making a movie. But I enjoyed covering the meeting for Councillor Lumley. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Mike.
On Friday, in the morning, I think it was 2 hours, and again 2 hours in the afternoon, and Teams that I worked with, I think we covered about almost 20 businesses in that time frame and did the interviews, and the plastic bags was an interesting one. The other thing that came of that was perhaps bulk purchasing of a Gibsons bag that could actually have additional individual identification put on it by businesses if they wanted to tag it to their own name, but identifying that they shopped in Gibsons. And that was an idea that came forward, among other things. And I don't want to kind of preempt the recommendations come forward. We participated in both two of the water dialogues that were held. They were very interesting and very, very well both presented and attended. And we have discussed what we would do in the future with that similar model. And one thing was, what about the highway? What do actually people want to see on the highway, and have that conversation with the community, both ends of the highway, as to how people would be impacted if a bypass was in fact implemented. If we keep pushing for it, it might happen. But then, what is the downside of that? I don't know. I attended a nice team meeting on the Friday and last week or 2 weeks ago, and then ended up raising money for Cops for Cancer shortly after that. So things and that was interesting. The Elphinstone Environmental session was very good, very well attended again. The Urban Interface Fires strategic planning workshop, we got together again and had our second walkthrough on the strategic planning. It's getting ready to. We don't want to come up with a perfect document. I mean, a perfect document kind of precludes consultation. We want a document that people are comfortable having input into, as opposed to saying, yes, I agree. We want the document built by the community, not for the community in this case. So we will be dealing with that. The Cadet Review, Sunshine Coast Community Foundation last evening had a donor reception and granting ceremony at the market, and it was very well attended. And they gave out, I believe it was approximately $90,000 in grants last night, given out by the foundation that now has a asset value of over $5 million. And I was on that board when they were struggling. They were celebrating their first $500,000. And now they've celebrating that they've exceeded $5 million. So it's really a wonderful testimony for the coast. So that being said, I think that's so. We did also meet with the O'Shea Ocean Mount Association and talked about the Prouse Road lift station with them at one of the homes up in the O'Shea Ocean Mount area. So that's all I have to report. However, I would like to acknowledge again that our CAO is going to be going to Halifax for meetings with the Canadian Council of Ministers for the Environment, where he'll be making a presentation on June 27th. He'll be taking time out of his own vacation to do that because he's going to be back east to our family vacation. They are paying all of his expenses. However, we need to do a resolution to support the insurance while he's out traveling in our province, because he is still representing the town while he's away. So that if council would pass, give me a resolution to approve him to be traveling at that time, Councillor Kroll, Councillor D'Andrade, and that's for the insurance company likes to know that he's out of the province and covered on insurance. And Mr. Machado, would you like to comment on that or talk a bit more about that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly it was over the last 2 or 3 weeks we received an invitation from the Federal Minister of the Environment. I was hosting our provincial colleagues and territorial colleagues in Halifax, and the goal of their meeting, I think they met, I haven't seen their whole agenda, but the day that I'm there, it's about the climate adaptation for Canada, and they're receiving a briefing from Environment Canada around what's expected in the future from a climate impacts in Canada, and it's about natural and green infrastructure as a topic. Ourselves and the Insurance Bureau of Canada as well, and Environment Canada, the 3 panelists.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your vacation and representing us there. So that'll be on June 27th. So Also for council, I don't know how many of you were able to respond as to whether or not you want to participate in the recycling tour next Monday. Councillor Kroll, you're in Vancouver, so yeah, okay, all right. So that will be next Monday, and okay, nothing further there. Correspondence, council reading file, a couple of items that have been highlighted for us. First of all, recommending that the reading file, recommendation of the reading file for the weekend in May 27 and June 3 be received. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Dindrad, all in favor? Thank you. It's received. First item 9.2, a letter from the Honourable John Horgan, Premier of British Columbia. This relates to arranging meetings at UBCM with ministers of the province, so that at UBCM what we have the opportunity to do is we have the opportunity to meet with ministers or other members of government or staff. And so that if there are any meetings that we'd like to have, I've suggested at the regional district that we coordinate those meetings with them as well, and that we ensure that if we're going to go meet with a minister, say arguably the minister of responsible for BC Ferries, that it be one voice, not three different voices. And so that if we have any particular ones we want to talk to, and then we need to give them notice for that. And there are different dates within those notice timeframes as well. So at this time, I don't know if council has thought about that or thought about any meetings they'd like to specifically have. CIO?
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just a suggestion that staff will check with our colleagues and see what the regional district and CSHOTs are considering. Yeah. And in the meantime, we can hear from council because we have a couple of weeks for this.
Yes. Yeah.
If you have a specific consideration, then we can discuss that as well.
Yeah. Councillor Kroll?
I believe Councillor Ladwig has been sort of wanting to have a meeting with the Minister of Transportation with respect to passenger ferries.
Yes.
Because that would be a mandate that would have to come from the Ministry to BC Ferries.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Dindrad?
Regarding transportation, I think it's very important that we, and I mean the regional government as well, which is taking the role of advocating for us, that we ask very strong support for transportation, electric transportation, because transportation is one of the biggest emitters of greenhouses. So we cannot meet our target if we don't have electric transportation. That's a reality. I think another thing is all the issues that we discussed in the intergovernmental meeting, right, about water governance and so. So I think this needs to a certain extent support. I mean, preservation of our recharging areas for the aquifer is a big one as well. We need to consider that. So I think we have a laundry list. Yeah. I'm happy to produce that.
Yeah, I had that on my list, meeting with Flynn Rowe about the recharge area, and I actually brought that up at the regional district last week with the approval of the movement of the contractor for the get my thoughts straight here, the concrete manufacturing up on Gilmore Road. There was a item there approving a building for them. So next question comes to the septic field. And when you look at the overhead, when you look at the air photos of the area now, there's a lot of industry going in that area, and that is on top of our recharge area. And I asked a question about fuel storage, bulk fuel storage and things like that. What is happening in that area? What preventative measures are being taken to contain spills or anything of that nature? So I've talked to the regional district about that, but meeting with Flynn Rowe and talking about the recharge area and how we can ensure greater protection of both what we have there and what is going on those properties is something I'm concerned about. So we have time to think about meetings, and as well as meetings with staff. We can make meetings with staff, and some of those we can actually make when we go to UBCM if something comes up later. If they don't have meetings booked, they're often sitting waiting. One could be, Councilor Lumley could be with the RCMP. That, if we want to meet with the RCMP at that point in time to talk about anything about our projections relative to policing, so that we can do those meetings. So, having been staff at those conferences for many years in the 90s, that I know that what it's like not to have meetings. You're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, so they'd like to talk. So, anything further on those items? Anything further on any of the items on the correspondence list? Yeah, Councilor Diendrad?
Yes. Sorry. Okay, this is from the June 3rd. There's so much, but I got this letter from this gentleman. Oh, it's actually Jenny. She's talking about being an elder and being homeless lately. And she mentioned about Kiwanis Village apartment. And we have talked about this in our affordable housing strategy, to be strategy. Is there like a realistic opportunity to build a space to build more units?
The Lions Club, as I understand, who are the owners of that property, they have plans to build a second building at that location. Councillor Kroll?
In another project we're working on, this came up, and apparently what the Lions are looking at doing is building a new building, demolishing the existing building, and expanding on the site of the existing building. I was going to comment on the same letter.
Yeah.
You know, here we have an 80-year-old lady who at the end of the month is going to be living in her car. And right. I think it's, a rude, yet another call that we have a huge issue. And this is also a person who would initially be a candidate for the old RCMP site should it move forward.
Well, yeah. Councillor Lumley?
I guess before they get too far, I guess they could work with planning. But I know there's two individuals very close to us that are building tiny homes, and it would seem to me to build big giant infrastructures of buildings is ridiculous. And I was in Roberts Creek. There was a gentleman that just finished a tiny home, and they're actually pulled on trailers, right? So, and it's $100,000, and it has everything in it, and it's ready to get hooked up. So, I don't know. Maybe this is a time that we could say, and we could work with them, and put affordable housing funds and everything, and our planner to use, and say, maybe there's a better way, because. You can fit, like they're small, you can fit them on a property, and I just don't understand why anybody would start constructing apartment units that seem just outdated now. I mean, the entire housing community is moving away from these type of things, right? So they're expensive. It's more expensive to build a giant structure and then divvy up units than it is for these small business owners to build these tiny homes and retail them. So maybe it's an opportunity for us to rethink and relook at how our density and how we can help homeless people. I mean, it's $100,000 for one of these things, and I think Pam is working just behind Rona there, building these tiny homes. I mean, it seems like the way to go. I mean, if we can start looking at these new areas instead of, all this massive construction. I mean, it just seems almost ridiculous to me. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think tiny homes certainly are an option, but what we need to have is a report from the planner and the building inspector on tiny homes. And there are zoning issues, and there are building construction issues and a number of different things that go into that. But perhaps we could ask, the planner's not here this evening, but perhaps at the Planning and Development Committee meeting. Oh, she is back there somewhere. That's right, yeah. Perhaps we could take note of that, and when she has nothing to do, but planning and development would be an opportunity. I know in the past, I mean, it's in the bylaws, and zoning bylaws, for example, are structured so that neighborhoods have somewhat of a similar look. So they define the width and the length of a building, for example, and they also provide the appropriate ISO code. I think it's ASO code. Yeah, that requires them to be at a current stage of inspection and quality. And that precludes somebody from towing in an abandoned trailer that they found in the woods somewhere and setting it up on a piece of property next to your house and saying, I'm going to live here. So there's all standards that have to be looked at. But if those standards can be met, I'm all in favor of doing that. And if neighborhoods can be comfortable with doing that, a vacant lot besides suddenly becomes a tiny home lot instead of a built lot, those are things that we have to think about and consider. Councillor Crowell.
I certainly agree with what Councillor Lumley is saying. I think, just to clarify, I think on the Kiwanis situation, it's providing sort of transitional housing where people could be renting a unit in the complex, but when it gets to the point that they need assistance, it's there for them. And that's sort of hard to do in a tiny home. Like when you're dealing with nursing staff and housekeeping, you can't be sort of moving to an open area with laundry carts and things like that. But the tiny homes, I think, are great for someone who's, self-sufficient and, needs accommodation.
Councillor Diendrad.
I was just going to emphasize that I believe it has to be a mixed approach. I agree with tiny homes. I was going even to talk about tiny homes, and perhaps the STRD might even have a bigger capability just because they're more rural. But I understand, the town of Gibson doesn't have too much space, so sometimes you have to go vertical. What is important is that we adopt a green building, right? So if they rebuild, and I understand the footprint of the demolition of concrete, it can be. I understand, but at the same time, maybe we find a place for the concrete put in the harbor to protect about climate change. I don't know.
It'd be a good conversation, especially under the affordable housing. And that's part of what Councillor Ladwig and her new select committee we could look at as the opportunity for tiny homes. So, moving on, any other correspondence that Council wants to address? Okay. So we're under bylaws.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe items 9.2 or 9.3 have been received.
Okay, so that motion to receive then all of the correspondence in the council reading file in 9.1, 2, and 3, which is the Councillor Lumley, Councillor Crowell. Thank you. Bylaws, the first one at 10.1, Director of Corporate Services, the results of the alternative approval process for the 219 Prosliff Road Station. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The AAP for the Loan Authorization Bylaw number 1264, 2019, Capital Improvements Financing Bylaw, closed on June 12th at 4 p.m. And I certified the results on June 14th. We had 334 electoral responses returned to the city, and that does not meet the 10% threshold. The recommendation, therefore, is to proceed and have the bylaw adopted.
Okay. First of all, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Crowell, Councillor Diendrad. Discussion. May have any questions about all the information about the processes there. And I have a question that came to my mind in reading the bylaw, the loan authorization bylaw itself, and that is that the loan authorization bylaw is for $1,760,000. What in terms of the actual numbers that we would actually borrow, how does that translate? Are we looking at borrowing $1,760,000, or are we looking at borrowing a lesser amount?
Well, it could be both, depending on the actual value of construction.
Yeah.
So we would be authorized to borrow up to that amount, and if the project comes under that, we would only borrow what we needed to borrow.
But the borrowing, where does it recognize the DCCs and the excess service costs and things of that nature?
So the budget is where we laid out.
Yeah.
At this point, this whole project's being borrowed for.
Right. Okay.
Because right now we don't have excess
we don't have the funds.
service charges.
Right.
They can be used to help offset the principal payments.
Okay.
So you would see them in future budgets as we go forward.
Okay. And the cost of borrowing for this was anticipated in the increases that we put in this past year?
Yes.
So that there's not an additional cost, it's anticipated within.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Council have any questions? Councillor Kroll.
Just from the presentation you did earlier, Mr. Douglas, it was my understanding that we're not really borrowing the money per se. It's a line of credit up to that amount, and then once the contractor invoices and the actual fees come in, they're secured with that. And then if it's under, the actual borrowed amount becomes a lesser amount, but it's not to exceed.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Essentially we'll start, so you'll see another bylaw come forward in the near future, which is like a temporary borrowing bylaw, but it's backed by this bylaw. And so you can only borrow on that bylaw under this bylaw. It's kind of a funny system. So while we're going through the project, we'll borrow short term, and once we finish the project, we'll move that into long term.
Councillor Lumley.
I know I can never. I know there's like about a $230,000 or $40,000 cushion that you all also built into this, right? So perhaps we won't even reach that mark. But just refresh me, because I know there's like restrictions on paying off debt. And the fact that you've got this project going, and I like maybe just refresh my memory on how, like, when you do municipal borrowing, it's not like if Gospel Rock comes online and the user fees and DCCs are paid, which will be significant. It's not like the town, or can the town use that to start paying off the debt and decrease the amount of interest that we're going to pay in the future? I'm just trying to.
So when we start the long-term debt, we're into it for a minimum of 10 years. And at the 10-year mark, you have some options around paying it down at with a larger payment, and then continuing with the remainder. But once you've done your initial borrowing, you're in that for 10 years.
Councillor Lewis?
I just had a question for curiosity, for context. This AAP looked like it was pretty close. Only 40 people needed to vote in the negative for this to fail. Are AAPs normally this close, or like how often does this happen?
Yeah, I don't know in terms of the total numbers. I haven't been involved in that many.
This is my first one. And I have to say, because the total number of electoral responses returned to the town was under the 10% threshold, they were not individually validated. So that difference, it could go down or up a little bit if we had to go through and validate each one. So we just take the total number when it's under 10%. I believe the last one the town ran in 2017, we received one response, but I don't know outside of that context how many responses we usually get back.
Councillor D'Andrade? Yeah.
I'm still not clear why the figures is 3.3 for the borrowing.
Sorry, can you say that again?
The figures here, the bylaws talks about to borrow upon the credit of the municipality a sum not exceeding 3.3. Why this number?
That's. I think you're looking at the next
You're
bylaw.
looking at the
Oh, okay.
You need to look
That's
at the
water
first one.
bylaw.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's 1.7 on this bylaw. Yeah. So So there's a recommendation in the package, and that is the loan authorization bylaw 1264-2019, capital improvements financing bylaw, Prouse Road lift station be adopted. Moved by Councillor Lumley, second by Councillor Crowell. Discussion? Councillor Diendrath?
I understand that there was a lot of controversy in this bylaw, and I particular, as a councillor, I still don't have all the facts. I heard from staff, but I also heard from the community, and I would like that staff would respond the questions that the community, which are also, some of them are my questions too. And I know that some of them were answered during the information sessions, but I don't feel all of them have been answered. So, and I don't want to go back to what has been happening back and forth, a lot of dialogue, there has been a lot of letters, but some of the letters, we cannot discredit the letters and just rule that claims that people are doing are unsubstantiated. The same way that, Mr. Mayor, there's even a claim here in your speech that it talks about over $300,000. I haven't seen this figure myself, so I would like a commitment from the council and the town of Gibsons as well, that when we have this kind of inquiry, that we backed up with factual information, because just a talk, it leaves me, the only thing I have is from the things that the public sent to me. That was factual because I saw some documents. So it's still in the back of my mind. And I think if we are looking for transparency, I would like this commitment as well, that we have not only just a verbal response, but something that we can really, that the councillors can be comfortable with the situation. I appreciate that.
Councillor Lumley?
Okay. I attended one of the information sessions for the AAP, and the only thing I can remember is every single question being answered. And if the Director of Infrastructure and the Director of Finance couldn't answer it on the spot, they invited every single person with those questions to meet with them after. I'm just not sure what else anybody can do. Like it's, Mr. Newman sat there, and people had like really specific questions. And because we were on a time constraint, because we had a council meeting afterwards, he invited every single person to make time with him. And I don't know what else you can expect from anybody. So, I mean, I don't think all those questions have to come through council and be answered, because I'm quite sufficient with the answers that I heard. And it's been through council like several times, and now we're going to vote on it. So, but I couldn't disagree more that every question got answered, and if it wasn't answered, staff made every single option for people to get answers. So if they don't have answers, then that's up to them. Either they didn't come and meet with the staff or ask for the answers. That's the only reason why they don't have them. So I don't agree with that statement.
Councillor Diendrath?
I was referring of written answers, written questions that have been, letters that have been sent to council. And I think if we are factual, what I'm trying here, I would like to be factual. It's very hard to make decisions by emotions or by someone said something. I think documents, if you see documents, then you can have a deep understanding of the situation. So that's what I'm referring to. I understand that during the meeting, there has been a lot of the questions were answered. Although on the second part of the meeting, the shorter meeting, there was not too much time. But I'm talking about written and also letters that came from citizens, and I don't think this answer have even been responded. So to me, it still feels the approach that there are some citizens that they are not interested in just factual information. They are interested in creating trouble to the town. And perhaps there might be situations that they did cause or staff felt that they did. But I think it's important to respect citizens. So I totally appreciate the approach that council is doing in protecting staff and about harassment and bullying, but I would like to see equal energy devoted to respect and through citizen engagement.
Councillor Kroll?
I sort of agree with what Councillor Lumley was saying, but, and I appreciate where Councillor D'Andretti is coming from, but I think we also have to appreciate there's a staff. And they can't sit down and personally write a letter to every single person that, we have to be able to trust the people that are hired to run the town, and they've done a good job. They've got incredible recognition for the work they're doing. But I think, there are times we just have to say, this is what they're saying, and it's a fact, it's based on this piece of paper, but just suddenly, for every inquiry, to have to go digging through files and pull out reams of paper and write individual letters when a public statement or information that comes through in a public meeting or an invitation is extended to individuals with questions, that I'll take the time to answer them. I think we have to respect staff's time. They have other things to do, other than sitting down writing endless letters.
Councillor D'Andretti?
I agree with your overall general statement, but we are talking about $1.7 million. So I think there's a big detail, and the devil is always in the details. So in this part, I agree there's no time, but this is a big thing. And this also has some historic past. So we're not dealing with a situation that just rose from day to night. So I think it's a situation that has a big footprint, and it just needs some special care from both sides, from both perspectives. If we're going to talk about transparency, fairness, good governance, we always have to look at from both perspectives. Thank you.
See no further questions, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, all in favor. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next bylaw, and that is now here's the one for 3.7 million. Now you can, 3.3 million, sorry. This is the Town of Gibsons loan authorization bylaw number 1265. And who would like to introduce that? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
The loan authorization bylaw number 1265, 2019, capital improvement financing bylaw. It's already been before council, and it was given first, second, and third reading and sent to the ministry. And the ministry caught a typo of ours on the bylaw itself, and that's what it's doing back before you. So we're changing it from the 20 to 25 years. The staff report and all the information that accompanied the bylaw was correct with the 25-year borrowing. It was the bylaw itself that had the 20. So this is to rescind third and redo third.
And just for the information of the gallery, this particular bylaw deals with the plan to extend the aquifer water to Zone 3. So this will also have to go through an AAP process, but this is the plan to extend the aquifer water. Again, the funding on this one here is offset by the amount of money that we currently pay to purchase water from the regional district. So there won't be a net cost to individuals. It's just the amount we pay annually to the regional district will offset the borrowing charges on this particular project. So the first step then is item 10.2, recommendation at third reading of loan authorization bylaw 1265 2019, capital improvement financing bylaw be rescinded. Someone care to move that? Councillor Kroll, Councillor Lemley, all in favor? Okay. And then the second one at 10.3 is that that loan authorization bylaw number 1269 be 2019 be read a third time as amended. So the first one was rescinding and amending to 25 years. So now it's being read a third time as amended.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if you could just reread the bylaw number. I believe you read 1269.
Okay. Did I? I'm sorry. Yeah, 1265. Thank you. 2019. That's right. Okay, thank you. Be read a third time as amended. Okay. Councillor Prohl. Councillor Lumley. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Okay, new business. Under new business, we have I guess both the happy event and the sad event of acknowledging our youth councillors and saying goodbye to them for this term. They are both going to be graduating from high school shortly, and they're both going on to other things in their lives. And I'm going to firstly, before we do that, give them a chance to say a final word. Finally, you could talk about the motion to close, I guess, later on. But so that who would like to say something? Yeah. Councillor Steinbeck?
Jason and I have both prepared statements. Do you want to go first, or you want me? Okay.
This is the statement I've prepared that thanks Council for the opportunity. Mayor, Council staff, it has been my honor to serve as one of the 2 inaugural youth councillors for the town of Gibsons. During my time in this position, I've had the privilege to see the inner workings of the town. I've gotten to meet great people from the town and the community, and I've been a part of a growing involvement of young people in politics in the community. The main point I will take away from this experience of being involved in the town is not to do with politics, but to do with the people that I've met. Every single person, inside the town or not, and across the political spectrum, has been nothing but supportive of myself and Sasha and the youth councillor position. This is something I am extremely grateful for and will cherish and remember when I look back on my experiences as a youth councillor. The youth councillor position has great potential if taken advantage of. I look forward to seeing what the next pair of youth councillors and the ones after them can accomplish with the town. I also believe the town should do its role in continuing to spread the role of the youth councillor. It has great potential, and I hope someday will be the norm in some communities. It would be great to look at the town, district, and or regional district and see students on council and have it treated like an ordinary position. The town, I believe, is doing a great job at listening at youth voices. The youth councillor position is just one of them. The mayor, council staff coming to talk with students, attending student-organized events, also shows how much the town cares about youth voices. I commend the town's effort on this, and I personally appreciate it. Once again, thank you, mayor, council, and staff, for allowing me the honor and privilege to serve as a youth councillor for town of Gibsons, and special thanks for Councillor Carroll for driving me to and from town hall for every meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Steinbeck.
That's a hard one to follow up. Thanks, Jason. Okay. It's difficult to believe that my term as youth councillor has come to an end. In the fall, Jason and I will be leaving Gibsons to go off to university. But the experiences that we've shared with this community will stay with us long after we're gone. During my term, I've as well felt incredibly supported and welcomed by the town of Gibsons staff, as well as members of the general public. So far, not a single person has brought up the fact that they didn't elect me. My mission has been accomplished. People in Gibsons also tend to be pretty vocal about these things, so yeah, it's just quite an achievement. But truthfully, I've noticed a large amount of positive community participation in the workings of our small town. Every info session and council meeting that I've attended has been full of people sharing their unique experiences and opinions. This robust community engagement is part of what makes living in a town like Gibson so special. Having a student council member shows people that their voices matter in the community, regardless of their age or walk of life. While I've had a great deal of fun sitting here behind my fancy name plaque, Jason and I have had several opportunities to represent the town of Gibsons outside of council meetings. One of my favorites has included the recent business walk that Jason and I undertook in conjunction with the Gibsons Chamber of Commerce.
For those of you who aren't familiar with this walk, we went around to local businesses in person and talked to them about their challenges and relationship with the town of Gibsons, as well as their relationship with the Chamber of Commerce. It was very interesting to hear from many local entrepreneurs, and we received some very valuable feedback. Another memorable experience was the council's historical walking tour, led by Dale Peterson. If anybody here has not had the opportunity to participate with Dale's tour, I would highly recommend it. He's extremely knowledgeable and passionate about our community, and I learned so much about the evolution of our little town. For example, the settlement of Gibsons was a fluke caused by a storm. George Gibson and his sons moored for the night and fell in love with Gibsons. They decided to stay and live here forever. Having lived here all my life, I can understand why. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has made Jason and I's experience on council so meaningful and fun, including Mayor Beamish and the entire Gibson staff. They work relentlessly to serve this community's needs. It's a challenging time for Gibsons. Among various obstacles, we're experiencing growth, rising homelessness, and water shortages. At the same time, we are directly in the midst of a climate change crisis which is unfolding across the globe. Despite the enormity of these issues, I've been shown time and time again that this staff and council is prepared to face these problems head-on, and that they will hold the needs and concerns of every citizen to the highest standard possible. While I wish that I had time to thank everybody from the town staff individually, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the hard work demonstrated by Lindsay Gerst and Tracy Foster. They are far more organized than I ever hoped to be in my entire life, and they always keep things running smoothly. Lastly, I would like to thank you, the Gibsons community. You come out with pride and with great passion to our meetings and events. As well as your community support towards the youth councillor position, you have made this town my home for the past 18 years, and I'm grateful to you for making me a part of such a unique and strong community. Thank you.
Good. Sasa, Jason, we're gonna miss you. You have helped us tremendously, and your insights and questions have been very valuable to us. And this is a unique program. We are the only council in British Columbia that has youth councillors represented on it. I've had a number of inquiries from others. The Lieutenant Governor, when she came here, one of the first things she said was, I want to know more about your youth councillors. She'd been well briefed. She knew we were doing this, and she spent quite a bit of time talking to Jason during that visit here. So much to the chagrin of others, she didn't visit with anybody else. She just talked to Jason. And that was great. And we're looking forward to September when we can have 2 additional youth councillors join us and follow in the footsteps that these students, who we are very proud of, have been able to do. So I think I have a presentation to make. Councillor Kroll, did you want to say anything while I get myself organized?
All I wanted to say is I was appointed as youth councillor liaison, and it has been an amazing experience to work with Sasha and Jason. I know when we had our council meeting going over the resumes and curriculum vitae that had been submitted to us, it was challenging. There were some amazing students willing to step up, toss their hat into the fray, as it were. And I would just like to thank you for stepping up, for setting the bar very high. I think you may get some pushback from your fellow students in time to come, because you have set a very high standard, and it's been noticed and really appreciated. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Rotary, who have partnered with us in this endeavor. Community, we're always scrambling, trying to think where are we going to get the money for this, and the initiative was proposed to Rotary, and they've stepped up and supported the initiative. So you'd never get taxpayer pushback, because your stipends have been duly covered, with our thanks to the Gibsons Rotary chapter. So thank you very much for your contributions to us as a council, to staff, and to the community, and wishing you every success.
I just want to thank the town for initiating this. I think it was great, and I'm so impressed with
Jason and Sasha for being the first two. I mean, I think you've got a hard, articulate, talk prepared as well. And we have fun time. We're so proud of this.
Thank you very much. We thank you very much for that. So, Sasha, if you want to come up with this, actually, we actually come down here and turn around to the public. We didn't ask students to come here for nothing. It's not a volunteer service for them. We actually paid them a stipend. We've done other services towards their education. So tonight they will be paid off, so to speak. And I'm not going to tell you how much, but they did a great job, and they did very well. And September, so Jason Lewis, I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you your plaque to hang on your dorm wall. And thank you very much for your time. Just I'm going to stand up here for. And Sasha, if you'd like to come forward as well. You slide that out, yeah. That's right. Yeah, leave the container. So, and let's stand in front of the microphone so we don't have that beside us. So, congratulations. And councilors, when they were all appointed, you all came up and shook their hands. Please come up. Success. Great. All the best. All the best to both of you. Okay. We'll see you again, I'm sure. So, with that, we're coming close to the end of our meeting. No notice of the motion. And next item is inquiries. This is the second inquiry opportunity in the meeting. So if anybody has any inquiries, and including the media at this point in time, we welcome your inquiries. Yes, Blake.
Thank you. Blake McLeod, Gibsons. I'm curious to know about the cost of the pilings and the repair to the Armours Beach. It was stated that the budget for that work would have to be met and that it was approved conditioned upon that. But I wondered how the budget is set, if expertise is required to set a budget. And I know there was mention of it, I think, with the Prowse Road Station, that there was an amount of money that was contributed to a company who would prepare a report and a budget or some sort of. Was that process gone through? I mean, it's a small project, but was there a process? I'd be curious to know what the process was that established the budget that has to be met by the motion.
Mr. Newman, can you respond, please?
Yeah, it's different on depending on the size of the project, but a lot of the smaller ones we look at similar type projects and draw from that to establish a budget.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Looking at previous projects or previous work, similar projects. Thank you. Thank you. Other questions, please? Media, any questions? Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Joan Beck, resident of Gibsons. This inquiry is a follow-up both to the statement from the CAO and the Mayor today. I've been approached by many residents in the community, and they would like to know from Council the exact amount of tax dollars that went to each of the cases and challenges that were dismissed and taxpayers' money that went into it. And in addition, it would be of interest to people to know what the damages were awarded to the town and how much has been paid, and if there's any outstanding damages that have not been paid, when will that debt be paid to the residents of Gibsons?
Okay, thank you. We'll take notice of your question. The amounts have so far been dealt with as in-camera issues, and we would have to have a motion from council to remove that information from in-camera because they all dealt with legal bills, as you appreciate. So, but we'll take notice of your question. Thank you. Yep. Other questions? Okay, so I got to find my glasses. Got to find where I am. So, as I mentioned to you, there are copies of that statement that I read. That's why you all stayed, I know, so that you can get a copy, so that there are copies there available now, so that, we have a motion to close. We have a recommendation the meeting be closed in accordance with Section 91A C-G of the Community Charter, dealing with personal information about identifiable individual, labor relations, and litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. So we are going to go into a closed session and motion to that effect. Councillor Lumley, Councillor Kroll, thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you for attending.